Portuguese writers of all time. She graduated, so she studied Romance philology, and then as a postgraduate studied classical theater, and wrote 2 books which I admire hugely, the first one of which is Lili's Fraser, and the second one, very recent, called Louise, which is about Elizabeth Siddal, muse, poets, and painter of the Pre-Raphael in England. Most recently, she won a major poetry award for a book-like poem called To Say Miséria. Let's welcome Hélia.
I must apologize for my English. It's self-taught English. My studies are in French and in Latin and Greek. I hope I won't make some terrible mistake. I really do appreciate. I must thank God. I think very much to Pedro and Ana for having invited me here. Because this is somehow the start of a dream, getting back the Renaissance spirit of putting together sciences and the humanities. I think someday they will meet again, and well, they're meeting now here. I'm not very fond of stories, not anymore. But I'll try to talk a little about the life of fiction writing. It's well, Virginia Woolf, to quote Peter Woolf's favorite writer. Virginia Woolf once said that fiction is a lady who put herself into trouble. And really, when a female author is asked about the cliched, common, but ever made, always, all the time, they're asking this question: why do you write? So, especially female authors answer, I write to go on living. I write not to die. Like Sherazade. I am Sherazade. Who, as you know, in the 1001 Nights, had to tell her husband, her fierce husband, a story that did not end, so that he didn't kill her in the morning and let her leave that in a way that she could finish the story. So her business was to go on keeping the suspense night after night, so that he couldn't behead her the morning after. And I think this is not nice question. I don't like this answer at all. First of all, because it is a metaphor. And the metaphors have been jeopardizing the quality of literature since centuries. You know, and when people started to use metaphor without ceremony and start making terrible, disgusting poems full of metaphors, with blue in your eyes and all that. So the truth of literature, the very the core, the heart of literature was in danger, was hurted in a terrible way. Because with the metaphor you don't catch the thing to be said like you should in itself, in its relief, its power, its light, its deepness, its secrets. You look at one thing and you think of another thing. And while you're doing this, people are very happy because they think they're writing literature. they are not. They are writing readable things, which are not at all the same. I think that the comparing explicitly is much more honest. In fact, it's what classically is called the simile. In fact, the first simile was made by Homer in the Odyssey, when he compares, but he honestly says, this is like that, not this is that. He compares the girls dancing by the river with the palm tree swinging under the wind. So this is okay. This is honest. This shows how the conception of the image is done. It shows the processes of getting there, and so this procedure is more earnest than the other thing of mixing images just in order to make some kind of poetry texts as they say in French, Champalimaud bourgeois, and pretend something is very beautiful and very poetical, and that's literature. But I was invited here to speak a little about stories. So I don't like the idea, and I think it's fake and it's cheap, literally. The idea that one writes in order to go on living, because one eats and goes to the doctor and kisses one's lover in order to go on living. It's not important to life itself, to that entity, if the person is writing or is not writing. That's not what keeps one alive. Actually, literature has killed more people than saved. If you think of the Romantic times and the Romanticists, and you think of all the people who killed themselves after reading those terrible novels and poems about death and about the misery of love and the attraction of the grave, all that empoisoned lots of generations and real people. Well, it's a classic of literature that people used to, young people used to read Werther, by God, and then committed suicide. It was something like going into a ball and taking a shot or something. It was very similar at the time. But that's people would say that's the power of literature. No, that's the power of fiction. That is the power of putting someone into a different life. And like we saw with the example, Jonathan's example of the brain, it's a very powerful idea that comes from the Greeks too. The idea of sympathy, of empathy, the idea of feeling with together. And if you take that plot, like Werther, as some truth, owing to what in literature we call the pact reader-writer, that is, that both of them make a kind of a break, of a suspension of true belief and reality, and so they make that kind of agreement. Okay, we both know that is not true, but we're going to take this as if it was the truth. So I'm going to cry with the love brief that is nothing but some ink on a sheet of paper. It's nothing more than that. That's the miracle of literature, of creation in general, and that's also some kind of weakness, because there everything is mixed. The great novel can touch you just like any soap opera can touch you. So there must be something more different other than the plot, because the plot is easy. The plot is all over. People need stories, but not necessarily good stories, or great stories, or canonized stories. And any story is a story. In the serial in TV, a soap opera is a story. In literature, we just there was a moment of theoretical analysis who found out just something that the abstract structuralists, as simple as this. What is a story? What is a novel? What is in a novel? Okay, it is one something, one character, we call it, the number 1 and the number 2. And in the middle of them, there will be something. There will be love, there will be hate, there will be some kind of feeling or desire, whatever. And then there will be obstacles. And with these elements, you make and you can analyze whatever story, since a soap opera to the War and Peace. And it's true. You can do that. As a teacher, I did that for some very, very little time because I got bored. It was too easy. It was like taking the flesh and just leave the bones and study. Sorry, the brain sciences, and study just the bones and forget everything else that composes. And that everything else is the text, is the writing, is the words, because it's in books, in literature. It's the word. The golden piece is the word, not the plot, not the story. You can have a story, you can have Romeo and Juliet, magnificent, and absolutely cheap and vulgar and ridiculous. You can have all sorts of approaches of the same subject. Because that's not the important. The important is the way the words build it, and with the words, the monument is made. I like to. I'm a little. Sorry, I'm a little. Kind of blindness about time, because I would like to tell you about the story of the stories, but I'll skip most of it. I won't have time. I would like to stress this: the fiction, the story. I don't like fiction. I don't like the fiction word because it comes from the Latin fingere. It means to fake. And the question is not about if the story is fake or it's real. This quarrel between the reality, the realism, or the postmodernism. If you should talk about the reality or about an another thing or make up some other thing. It's not important when you go to the text, but the text is there. You don't care less about what it is dealing with outside the text. So I don't speak very much of fiction, but story is okay. And you know that stories have been made not to save the person that writes them, but to save the mankind. That is how stories started. Because in 3,000 years back, in the wilderness, in the confusion, chaos, the frightful world people lived in, what they could do was not to understand the poem. That's perhaps your job now, and we never know. We never know how much we can understand it. It was not to understand, it was to appropriate the reality with words and turn that frightful reality into stories able to be told. In the family, with the wanderers, with the poets who went from one place to another. And most especially, that was very important for the Greek people from generation to generation. Before Socrates and Plato, the main idea of the cosmogony in Greece was that there was no afterlife. I mean, there was afterlife, but it was awful for everybody. There was the compensation. If you are good, you go to heaven. There was no heaven and the hell. There was only hell, but a special hell, no fire in it, like Mr. Pope now said. There's no hell. For the Greeks, there was no fire. Hell, it was some dark place where people turned into shadows and were forever unhappy, whoever they had been while living ones. They were unhappy, and they only urged to do something, which was to get hold on some living person and drink a little of blood so that they could for a moment speak and come back and taste a little bit of reality. And so the glory, so the aim of everybody, and mostly of the heroes, was to die young, to go into the battles, to become famous, so that they could be they could live a kind of eternity in the words that would be told about them. That was just what could make them last. It was those words. And so with the Hesiod, I don't know how to say that in English, Hesiod, just with the words, the whole world was turned into a system, a coherent system, and inhabit with lots of gods, even with generations of gods. The first generation, then the second generation, and terrible battles and stories, never-ending stories. And so the world could be understood through that. That's what mythos, the word myth means, actually. It doesn't mean the story of gods. It means, in Greek, the thing that has to be told. The thing that is told. That's the word mythos, what the word mythos, mythos mean. Sorry, I get carried on when I start talking about these ancient things.
because they are really amazing and worthwhile. For instance, there was some question about politics. The concept of justice in Greece, that was a very, very high concept, was put in words and was able to be taught from generation to generation through a story. That then it became a tragedy by Aeschylus, 3 tragedies actually, a trilogy, and because it's the story of how the vengeance and the hard feelings among people stopped being having the resolution like in Camorra, like in the Vendetta, you know, stopped being a blood affair where families killed each other, and started to be confided, to be given, to be trusted to a third entity who was no interested part in it. That lives in the words of a tragedy, in the myth, and it still is in the Acropolis. There is a kind of a plaque in Acropolis with those words. From now on, the justice will be applied by the elected citizens to do it. That comes from a story, just from a story with gods, among gods and men, and the intervention of gods. Then it found the superior, the ultimate form in the tragedy, which was something very, very difficult to achieve, because it was not just get like a playwright today. What am I going to do? I'll write like this with those characters, and this says, one says this thing, the other says another thing. No, there was only 3 actors, and all the game of being on stage, getting off stage, had to be thought. How could the characters interact? And the writing was in verse, and each verse had to have certain constraints of long and short and high and low, that we can even imagine how difficult it was to make. So, as you see, the text was much more powerful than the plot, than the story itself. It's I had promised Pedro that I would tell you a personal story, but I think I won't have time for that. Sorry, I guess. What do you say?
No, for the story, of course. Yeah.
I have time, but it's a long story. Oh, I'll try to shorten it, but it's well. It has nothing to do with this. It has to do with the other question. Where do the stories come from? How do you imagine your stories? That's the other question. Like the Sherazade one, it's this. This is the other question everybody asks, and I always answer I don't know, because I really don't know. I don't have the conscience of building a story with that architect structure. I take this character and that one, and they're going to make this with this obstacle and all that. I write in, as I used to say, I write in blindness. I'm a blind person, just writing at the sound of some music. But the funny story, which I'd like to leave to your scientific consideration, and neuropathologic consideration, is this. I was once in a session with other writers, and I had just published a book about the end of the world in a little village, and there was a child who suddenly appeared there. And the child was blue-eyed and blonde and mute. She didn't speak. And she just showed and walked, and then she is really the detonator of all the trouble that follows in the village. And so people know about my connecting to the Nordic Celtic legends, and so they said, okay, this is not Portuguese. This child could not be conceived in a Portuguese culture environment. She's clearly a fairy from Ireland or something. What did you think? How did you make this up? So I said, I don't know. I just saw a little child like that following an old man, and I just paid attention and started to write after that. And there was another writer whom I love very much, so, and he's a very popular person in Portugal. This is Rui Zinc. He was there with me, and so he said, okay, she's always making how do you say, making charm. She's always having an attitude just to be charming. I'm not like her. I'll tell you exactly how I wrote my book. And so he explained, it was Apocalypse Now, I remember. So he explained step by step everything he had to think when in the process of writing. I need someone sick with such a characteristics. I'll ask someone, a doctor, what kind of sickness should that be? Then this must happen. Then this chapter, this happened. So he had all the book in his mind before he wrote it. So I was quite embarrassed, and it was funny because people who knew me at the end. There was a little struggle. People who knew me said, no, she means it. She's saying what happens to her. So the other people said, no, she's not. She's just making herself interesting. And well, it was not pleasant for me that evening, but I had to let it go. So some time after, I went to to a village where I have family, where I used to go a lot when I was a child, and where I have cousins, and I still go there from times to times. It was very important in my country culture because my parents were very progressive, civilized, scientific people in the main village, and then I used to go there and learn all the other things about country life and agriculture and animals and all that. So I was there, and my cousin said, okay, so the director of the library in the village is coming to talk to you, to invite you for something there. And she said the name, and I said, I don't know her. And she said, no, you know her when she was a child because she lived here, and she was still her cousin from the other side. And so the lady came in, and I looked at her and said, this is my baby. This is my child from the book. And it really was. I had met her as a child in that little in that hamlet where my cousins lived. She had a very special story because her father had died when her mother was still pregnant. So there was a kind of aura of tragedy around the child. And in a place where everybody was descendant of the Moors, everybody was and still is brown, brunette and brown-eyed and short-sized. She was different. She was very, very blonde, almost white, cendré, white-haired, with the blue eyes. And she never mixed with us, the other children. We were playing, and she never came to play with us. So she was like mute, because I never heard her speak. And so she came in the room, in my cousin's room, and I said, "Oh, so you are the child of my book." And I told her what happened. I said, "I never understood where that child came from, and some people bored me, saying, 'Oh, don't be.' I don't know where the child comes from. I saw a child after an old man, walking after an old man. That's all I know." And she said, "Yes, that's true, because I was always walking after my grandfather." And so there was a vision that I had as a child, and of course it had impressed me and the other children too, because it was a very special child who wouldn't play, wouldn't talk to us, and who was very, even physically different from all the children in the village. So it's up to you to know in which part of the brain that child lived inside me for 20, 30 years without being acknowledged at all. I did not think that that person existed anymore. And so there's suddenly that little scene appeared into my eyes, and I wrote. So this is something that I can give you as a testimony, a real one, almost a confidential one, in a case study, which of course does not compare with the great subjects of the inspiration. There are lots of stories, but I would finish just evoking Coleridge's story. Coleridge was, he wasn't addicted to opium, but he tells the story himself. Yes, okay. So let me just say he was having opium and writing a poem, and someone knocked at the door, and he stopped, went to answer the door, and he could never finish the poem anymore. Okay, thank you, sorry. Então,